Autism O Gaming. You might want to change that name. I'm just saying, so people might find that offensive. Even if you actually are autistic, that could be seen as offensive. I'm just throwing that out there. And by the way, I'm gonna say this outright. There's absolutely nothing wrong with people who are autistic. I know many people who are autistic. All right, and they're perfectly normal, fine, good, positive people. There's nothing wrong with this at all. Viking asks if I'm autistic. Of course, you didn't know? You can't tell?
Editor Logan here. I just wanted to give you all some context before the video gets started. This is from a conversation I had a little while ago with a detractor known as Who's Poppin' and his wife Anna. Anna is a psychiatrist who treats people on the autism spectrum as she is on the autism spectrum herself, and Who's Poppin' has his own experience as a mental health nurse. I can't thank them enough for giving me the time to talk with them and provide insight into DSP and autism. Here is the first video in the series. Hope you all enjoy it. Here we go.
I just want to sort of broach the subject of neurodiverse people being drawn to neurodiverse streamers.
Okay.
So if you think about, like, you're not going to go and watch a stream about a football game if you don't like football. So I think the premise of it would be, you go to watch a stream maybe 90% of the time for the streamer. The game is mostly irrelevant unless it's a day one release.
Correct.
And I just want to talk about, like, Phil's genuine fans, you know, personally, and I've got a little bit of evidence to support this for maybe one of the future videos I'm thinking about making. But I think a lot of Phil's true genuine fans are like Phil. They're on the autistic spectrum, or there are other neurodivergent issues going on. And do you want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, so if I come on that, so, I can sort of speak on that from two perspectives. One as being a psychiatrist who kind of diagnoses autism and works with autistic people, and also being autistic myself. And I think big part of being autistic, it's sort of finding yourself quite isolated in that general, community of neurotypicals, when you often feel, like you don't belong and you are very different. You may not necessarily understand why that is if you are not diagnosed. Even if you have a diagnosis and you kind of can manage those interactions, it can still be, quite difficult and tiring, to be interacting with neurotypicals. So I think autistic people are naturally drawn to each other because we are looking for our own tribe. We often share similar strong interests, so we kind of congregate in groups around that. But there is that genuine pull, just towards other autistics. The way we communicate, is specific to autistic people, so we tend to get on better with each other. We speak about things that other autistic people like to listen to. So, I think it just makes perfect sense. As an autistic person, you will seek out streams that are made by autistic people. And the other bit to it is, how much time many autistic people spend online. There is something about online communication and, kind of using those various ways and platforms that the internet offers that just suits our communication styles so much better than, the kind of face-to-face real-world interactions.
What did I say to you last time, Logan, when I rang in? I said, Philip is exactly where Philip wants to be.
And let me tell you, I love it. Like, I love my life. Again, I want to reiterate, because I know today is kind of a bitch fest when it comes to OBS. This definitely was the OBS bitch fest today. But I want you guys to understand that I really like my life. This is the best life I've ever lived right now. It's funny, I'm 40 years old, and so many people hit a midlife crisis when they hit 40. And I'm the opposite. I'm enjoying life more today than I was before, ever. And I mean that, but the days when I was single, the days when I was traveling, going to conventions and shit, all that time, it was frivolous. I was traveling for Street Fighter. Now I feel like I have a meaningful life. I love this. To me, I love my life. I'm absolutely loving my life. And I say that I can say this to all of you, all of you out there, the 500 plus people watching live, the people who will be watching this on demand after, even those people who want to make fun of me constantly, I have something I really want to tell you. And I mean this. Every day of my life is the best day of my life. That's why I think that so many people out there are in pain and are hateful and hate others and think it's okay to step on others. I got to step on others to get ahead. I got to hurt others to get ahead. Because you're not happy. Because if you were happy, you wouldn't want to crush others. You wouldn't need to crush others. Because you would be okay. There's so many people out there who are hurting and no one gets it. Once you get it, you don't need to do that anymore. You don't need to be upset about every little idiot who says something about you, every little moron who pokes at you. You know, you don't need to hyper focus on the negative. You can just be positive about the good things in your life.
He's in that office 10 hours a day. He's got 3 cameras. He doesn't have to speak to anybody. He doesn't have to try and read somebody's body language. He doesn't have to get any feedback off anything he's saying. He just says it in his office. And I think that's why Philip is exactly where Philip is in life. He wants to be there because he's autistic.
You know, in many ways, it sounds to me like a dream job. You know, you are just kind of working from your home office that you have set up, you know, the way you want. You talk about things that are your special interests and passions all day long. You know, that kind of, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the concept of info dumping.
Yes.
You know, it's kind of how we describe it in an autistic community when you have those long monologues of things that you really feel passionate about. That tends to drive neurotypical people around the bend because you just keep going on and on and on about something and can't always pick up on cues that they're bored with it. But, you know, when you have an autistic audience, great, because, you know, they often understand the info dumping and will, you know, allow that of each other. If somebody's info dumping on the subject I'm interested in, I can just spend hours, you know, listening to that because that's fantastic. But, you know, just the process of sharing information about something, you know, autistic people feel passionate about is really enjoyable. So, you know, it sounds like an excellent way to spend 10 hours, you know, without maybe, you know, feeling tired or bored of it at all.
Yes.
It doesn't sound like the sort of job that you are being like, you know, clock watching and thinking like, oh my God, when I can go home? You know, more something that comes naturally.
Right. I will say that it really is a sort of dream job, especially for someone like Phil. And I think what you just mentioned about the concept of info dumping, I don't know how much of Phil's streams or content you've seen, but his content is mostly him info dumping about something that he wants to talk about.
I hope you're doing better than me yet again. Yet again. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I have a story to tell you about last night. Because yesterday, because I went after also work some private videos I for people who and because that I took that off for streaming, not for work certainly, but for streaming, or to film, upload private videos, those purchase them. You know, well, let's put it that way. I think anything can go wrong, you'll go wrong. I think if you do anything can go wrong, you'll go wrong. But in a way, they never expect it every possible way. So that means you think about one thing, solve 10 more things people, and then next thing you know, it's like 3 a.m. and you still have a problem. That's probably more accurate description. I'll tell you a story this morning. What happened last night? I don't think I can tell the people in particular. The person who purchased several private videos from Slayer, okay, we talk about public Slayer, always uploads. Any private video they purchase from me, they can play, to its own jail. So people watch publicly. Okay, it was funny last night. I'm on all these issues, and I actually had 3 different people contact me, one Twitter, one email, and one email, all asking, hey, Phil, you forget to upload the video last night. Is that there? Always upload the cover. It's not there when we're having this reason, and like, no, you can't.
So I can understand why people with autism do sort of migrate towards him. And what you mentioned a little earlier about the internet being a great place for people on the spectrum is because you really can go down these rabbit holes and you can find people who are very specifically into the things you are into, which is great for folks with autism, because even in my limited experience compared to the two of you, I find that a lot of autistic individuals do tend to hyperfixate on something, whether it is a cultural phenomenon, like a lot of autistic people I've known are into Star Wars and or Star Trek a lot. You know, a lot of times people will just pick a thing or pick a topic and get really into it. And I see that in Phil, and I see that in a lot of Phil's viewers, to be honest.
Genuine ones.
Yes, absolutely.
Because sometimes the amount of LARPing that goes on, it's very difficult to cut through the bullshit and actually see what's going on. It's just something I've noticed anyway.
Now, I wanted to ask sort of a follow-up question about the phenomenon of info dumping, because really the experiences I have with autistic folks is that I spent a few years as a non-teaching staff member at a summer school for people with ASD. So in a working capacity, I sort of had a non-technical viewpoint, and also obviously friends and family members on the spectrum. Would either of you say that info dumping can be a source of comfort for people on the spectrum?
Absolutely. It kind of almost merges with, one of the forms of stimming. It can be really pleasurable, really self-soothing. So it can kind of serve different purposes depending who you are kind of info dumping on. But I think that kind of info dumping into a void almost that is happening with Phil, because, he isn't speaking to specific people, he's having this stream that is going.
So thank you for confirming my bias, honestly, because I have always thought of Phil's propensity for looping and info dumping to be a coping mechanism as a result of autism, because if you watch a lot of his streams, he will talk about the same things over and over and over again. We call them therapy sessions, but it is as though he's trying to comfort himself. That is very obvious to me with Phil.
Well, everyone, this is the Daily Wrap for Wednesday, the 23rd, 2025. I actually already filmed a Daily Wrap, and it was a really positive, great one. And now I have to refilm this an hour later at 11:16 p.m. to tell you how messed up my situation is when people say things about how Phil over-exaggerates and Phil constantly is just talking out of his butt. So here's what happened today. At 8:55 p.m., I attempted to get the Switch 2. I was going between multiple different websites, including Best Buy, Walmart, Target, and more. Couldn't get it from anywhere but Walmart. Added 2 to cart. Actually checked out both the Mario Kart bundle and this regular Switch 2. Regular Switch 2 was coming June 5th on release day. The other one was coming June 8th. Great. Checked out, paid, good to go. Finishing up my work, turned the stream off. Okay, I'm going to film the Daily Wrap. As I'm filming this Daily Wrap, I announce, hey, I got 2 Switch 2s. What a great day. Everything's amazing. And then I check my email where it proceeds to tell me that both orders have been canceled. Does it say that it's because of an error on Walmart? No, it says I canceled the orders. So I'm currently talking with Walmart right now about someone socially engineered my account on Walmart.com, and through basically very basic information, what it must have been, because it certainly wasn't anything crazy, they got access and canceled my orders. So now I don't have a Switch 2. I was going to get 2. I was going to keep one, maybe give one to my wife, maybe have a backup in case the Switch 2 failed at launch, because that's what happened with the Switch 1. Maybe eventually do a giveaway. And now I have nothing. Good morning, everyone. Whew. On today's show, we got a lot to talk about. There's a lot of good stuff going on right now if you're not aware. But of course, to offset all of the positive, we've got one overwhelmingly ridiculous negative. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, my trolls, my detractors, my stalkers, mentally challenged, ill people, criminals, whatever you want to call them, have once again broken the law and committed identity fraud against me. Yes, because last night, live on stream, I was able to get Switch 2 pre-ordered. And then they went in and through social engineering, canceled my orders. I'm going to explain the entire thing to you on today's show, and I'm going to tell you how we're going to proceed moving forward. So, the real story, not their 5,000 conspiracies that they all came up with overnight because they're all mouth-drooling, insane idiots wearing tinfoil hats, but instead, the real story of what went down last night, but also a bunch of positive stuff. On today's episode of the Level 1 podcast. What is going on, everyone? Today is Thursday, the 24th of April, 2025. I'm DSP. And folks, when people tell me that I am paranoid, that I have become shell-shocked, and I'm like really just scared, because I tell you guys, I limit my content to what I'm actually doing in this room. All right? That means that any content that I make, I'm recording, I'm streaming, whatever it is, comes from this place right here, and that TV, and that PC, or those consoles, and these cameras. This is the content that I put on the internet. And if you ask, well, I don't get it. Why? Why, Phil, is that all that you do? Couldn't you do vlogs of your house? Why don't you go cook a meal in your kitchen? Why don't you do an IRL stream following you around town to see what you do on a daily basis? Why don't you record a grocery trip and show us what you buy? They call it a grocery haul or something like that video. It's very popular, right? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? All right? Now, for most people, these things seem like commonplace things, harmless, interesting, even ideas of variety content that Phil could put out on the internet and would get him attention and views and support from his followers. However, what you don't understand, very simply put, is that commonplace things for everyone else become actual IRL harassment, becomes things that can actually hurt myself, my family, my livelihood. You guys have no concept of how many idiots have tried to hurt me over the years. I've been around for over 17 years as a content creator. You wouldn't even want to hear the half of it, of the stuff that's been done to me and the attempts that have been made to try to screw with my life. Insane stuff, like ridiculous, over-the-top crap you wouldn't believe.
And that sort of links with another, key concept of repetition.
Yes.
You will kind of notice repetition coming a lot, when it comes to autism, stimming, that's repetitive, kind of movements and doing things over and over. Info dumping, can again take that very kind of almost ritualistic form when you are sharing information, not just on the same topic, but it's almost, following an exact script. And then it comes in, the repetition really comes to the fore. And that's, when it's, I would say, at most soothing, because, there is very little, kind of need to really think it through, or, how you kind of share that information. It just sort of flows. And the more you kind of do it, the more you know the script, and you are just kind of, repeating the same thing over and over, which can be very calming. So yeah, repetition, I think it's important.
But
Does Phil's begging remind you of repetition?
Oh, begging. Yes.
Yes. Asking for the money.
Yes. Asking for the money is a very comfortable thing that Phil can do. And I think that's why he's so happy when it works, because he'll kind of think to himself, wow, I asked for something and I got it.
The big thing here is I need to find a way to make it work so that it's not going to be a crazy, unhinged environment, but also I got to make it work for me. I got to make it that people will support that stream. I'm not going to be partnered on Kick that first stream or the second stream. I need to make money, so it's going to have to be kind of like, tips there, right? Please tip me during the stream, so at least I can make some revenue so I can do the pull like you guys want to see me do during the stream. I just received a $40 tip, and the person said, bayonet charge. Well, I don't know what the bayonet charge references to, if it's a specific game or movie or something, but I appreciate the generous tip. $40. That is the biggest tip of the day.
Which, the autistic folks that I've worked with, that, conversations can be a bit of a triumph for some people on the spectrum if they can ask for something from someone and get it, because conversationally, I think people on the spectrum tend to struggle a lot with sort of the give and take of a conversation. And maybe for Phil, his begging is the way of having that sort of give and take. Like, yes, I'm validated. I asked for this and I got it. These people understand me. These people respect me,
I think there is something about, how autistic people sort of form relationships. And, I'm kind of speaking generally, and obviously it's not going to reflect, every single autistic person on the planet.
Right.
But, often our relationships are quite heavily transactional. We kind of make friends with people, that meet certain needs, or, we kind of do certain things together, or, we kind of support each other in certain ways, and it kind of, it's a give and take, and there is some form of transaction. It's not a relationship for the sake of having a relationship. So both parties are getting something out of it, and it's at the core of a friendship. And I think that's a little bit different than how neurotypical people can tend to see a friendship. That kind of transactional element does not necessarily come into it. It's more, you like people because you like them and you like to spend time with them, rather than that kind of, give and take.
Right.
A common way, how we kind of show affection or friendship towards people, in our autistic community, is something we call pebbling. It sort of comes from the penguins, and the way penguins show affection to each other, they give each other pebbles.
Okay. Right.
And we kind of took that, to be like a description of what's going on.
Right.
So when we think about the person and we want to kind of show that affection towards them, we will use a token, because we don't necessarily show kind of emotions in the same ways, or we may not be particularly touchy-feely. So, rather than, kind of show affections in other ways, we will use some form of a token and, give it to other person. It may be a gift.
Mm-hmm.
It may be money. But, it may be something like, sending somebody a funny meme, or, you kind of thought about them, when you have seen a video and you was like, oh, good day, I'm going to like it, so I'm going to send it to them. So you kind of use some sort of a token that the other person is going to appreciate, and they are kind of gonna be doing similar things back. And I think with Phil, if I was an autistic person into the sort of things that Phil is doing, I would probably be thinking, well, he's already providing me with all this content, so I'm getting a lot from Phil, so naturally I will have a desire to give something back. He is giving me a ton of pebbles in terms of all this content, that it's really valuable. So it's only natural that I should reciprocate and give something back. And what it seems, Phil is in desperate need of is money. So it makes perfect sense that I should, make that token, a bit of money, even if it's a small donation or whatever. Mm-hmm. This is something important to Phil, so let's give him that. So it's to me, it doesn't seem like from an autistic perspective, like Phil is somehow taking advantage of people and getting money for nothing. He's providing content that is enjoyable and valuable.
Even though we don't enjoy it, Logan, it doesn't mean others aren't.
Right. And really, it's interesting, Anna, that you used the word reciprocation specifically, because that is a buzzword for Philip. He says that all the time.
Gene, you're welcome. He says, don't say thank you to us, we say thank you to you. No, I always say thank you to you guys. Again, it's my idea is that this is reciprocal, okay? It's reciprocal. I provide the free content, right? You enjoy the free content because you enjoy it. You hang out, you give that positivity, and then you give that support back, and I use that support to reciprocate and make more of the content you want. That's damn straight. Reliable source just said, thank you for busting your ass playing video games every day and then begging for money. You're welcome. I provide the service you require, or else you wouldn't be here, right? I provide you with the entertainment that you're seeking. You get it, reciprocate. Except you, because you haven't ever reciprocated, so you better reciprocate right now. Get to it.
He says, if you like this content, I need you to reciprocate. He will say that flat out. So correct. It's almost as though, and this is gonna sound like a pejorative term. It's gonna sound like I'm being nasty, but I think I'm just being factual. It's almost as though he creates an autistic feedback loop where he believes as an autistic person he is giving others what they want. Thusly, the other autistic people on the other side of the equation will say, yeah, maybe I should give him some money because he did what he said he was going to do. It's kind of... both sides are feeding each other in a very weird way.
And like from a neurotypical perspective, you would kind of look at it and thinking about it like, oh my God, there's some like serious manipulation going on here. Looking at it more, from an autistic perspective, what I'm thinking is like, well, this is a pretty clear communication. He's bluntly stating what it is that he requires, and people who are able to provide that form of a pebble and a token, like he makes it easy. You have all those ways to kind of click it and give money in an easy way. So, pebbling, it's made very straightforward. So, it just kind of seems to suit both parties. So, if I was into his content and, kind of watching regularly, I don't think I would be sort of feeling like, oh my God, I'm sort of being, taken for a ride or taken an advantage of. Like I'm getting something out of it and I'm giving something back.
So could it be, and again, people are gonna hate me for this and throw tomatoes at me in the comments when this video goes up, but could it be that us as some neurotypical detractors, could it be that we're being uncharitable to the situation? And if this is what everybody wants, is it really that harmful? If autistic people want to give him money and he wants to receive money from them? Because we've seen interviews, short interview clips with people who claim to be on the spectrum who support Phil. And they say, I thought I was helping him out. I genuinely thought I was helping him out. And I think he has autism too. Is it really that bad? I guess is the moral question if nobody thinks they're being manipulated. Because what's manipulative in my eyes may not be manipulative in someone else's eyes.
Big part of, how we would answer that question, there's something about honesty. And generally, honesty is quite important for autistic people. We tend to take each other pretty much on face value. And most of the time, you can sort of safely assume that people are not going to lie unless they have very good reasons, like, for their own personal safety.
Right.
For example. So, if somebody is telling you that, they're in dire financial straits, generally, we would think like, okay, this person is in a real financial problem here, and that may then influence decisions about, what sort of pebbling are you going to offer?
Okay.
If you are thinking like, oh, this person is really struggling to pay the bills, rather than just put a nice comment and give times up. You may kind of, give a couple of dollars and think like, oh, what, I'm going to help you out. Because, that is like the most important thing, for you at this moment in time. And I think, from those little bits of Phil content that I have seen, I know there's a bit of a controversy regarding the honesty around his finances and, what he was sort of sharing on streams versus what's reality. And, I think that's the bit that would sit, not very comfortably for a lot of people in autistic community, the lying part. Not so much, that kind of reciprocal financial exchange going on.
Well, and it's, you know what? I'm going to pivot to something else based on part of your answer. When you said lying can be okay or it can be forgiven for people on the spectrum if someone has good reason to do so. And a lie that Phil a rationalization that Phil uses for lying all the time is, I had to lie to protect my family. And I feel like even when he's outed for lying, he usually says, I had to lie to protect my safety, my security, my family. So I think that's why a lot of people on the spectrum stay with him, because they'll think to themselves, well, if he really was trying to protect himself, I understand that. That makes sense. So maybe it's not direct manipulation, because I believe Phil believes he was trying to protect his family by lying. And so do they, so might the folks on the spectrum that are donating to them. It's hard to know what's actually intentional manipulation and what's just manifestations of autism, really. That's it for this one. Again, big ups to Anna, big ups to Who's Poppin'. Thank you both for spending the time with me, and big ups to Raw Phil for the clips. Keep an eye out for the next one next week, where we talk about Phil's altered perception of reality. See you then.